Hey, welcome to Cosmic Tía. I am Cara Viadiel. I am an astrologer, tarot reader, and I work with the plants, the ancestors, and healing and community, where we explore storytelling and the wisdom that lives within our lived experiences and our ancestral memory. We talk about astrology, tarot, and plant allies, building community and healing with our ancestors. Today, I am honored to welcome a very special guest, self-published author, rooted in Texas, Betty Feregrino, My Book Escape, Chapters of a Chicana. I loved reading this book. I had the pleasure, she sent it to me, and I read it while I was in Texas. And as someone who also grew up in Texas, it was just so relatable to, and like, I think healing to see that representation. So in this conversation, we're going to explore her journey. I'm just inspired by the self-publishing aspect too. I think we need to be telling our stories more, celebrating that cultural depth, carrying that spirit. So celebrating those reflections, both intimate and collective. I know this can be like a really vulnerable experience, sharing your story. It's a memoir. And I felt really called to interview her. So I'm so excited to be able to share this memoir with you all. My book, Escape Chapters of a Chicana, a memoir by Betty Feregrino. Please check it out. She just shares her experience of the reality of prejudice on different levels. So coming in one's community, exploring the realistic complexities of parental relationships from childhood, which I think so many of us constantly unpack daily. I know that's what I'm talking about a lot with my clients and my friends and my community. And so just unpacking those patterns generationally, I'm so grateful to use these ancestral tools of storytelling, astrology, and just healing with the natural world. So thank you for joining me today. I'm so grateful to have you here. Welcome to this space, and check out this interview with Betty Feregrino. Okay, so this is a selenite spray, moon nectar. And so it's for the moon, water, Selene, kind of inviting in the ancestors, grounding into the earth, maybe taking a deep breath into the body as you hold the vision of whatever you'd like to call in, as we connect and celebrate you and your story. Thank you, thank you, thank you for meeting with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Cosmic Tía. Today we have Betty Feregrino, an indie author from Texas. I'm so excited to connect with you. Tell me a little bit about who you are and your background.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the introduction. So, as you mentioned, my name is Betty Feregrino, and I am native Houstonian, but I currently live in Austin, Texas. And I recently published my debut memoir, My Book Escape, Chapters of a Chicana. There was a lot of healing for me in this book and writing. Growing up, I grew up in poverty to immigrant parents from El Salvador and Mexico. And there were just lots of traumas. And I always grew up with this sort of shame surrounding that. And it took, through my late 30s to realize I don't need to be ashamed. Like, I've become a success, and I want others to know, if they're growing up like me or if they grew up like me, that it's okay. There's hope. There's a way out. And I just wanted to share my story to help take shame away from other people, because I know I'm not alone. So,
That's so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for writing this book and sharing your story. I absolutely loved reading it. It felt really relatable. A fellow Chicana from Texas. And just that's actually whenever I went home for the holidays, that's where I was able to sit down and read it. And it just like totally took me back to growing up there. And so I was so excited to connect with you and just like highlight and share this, because I think there's so many of us who can relate. So the more that we can like come together, especially during these times, it's really important to heal together, and healing is wholeness. And how do we do that? And I think the first thing is removing shame and, liberating those parts of ourselves. So thank you, thank you, thank you for showing us how it's done. What was the book writing process for you? Like, when did you decide that you wanted to write a book?
It's really interesting. My husband and I was a book nerd, so I loved reading. And he drove us to Austin, Texas before we moved here for our first visit to the Texas Book Festival. And
Yeah.
as we were heading towards the panels of authors to listen to their, panel discussion, he just says out loud, "You should write a book." And I was like, like everyone writes a book, And I thought, I'm a reader, I'm not a writer. Or at least that was my response. And I think it was like the universe's way of planting that seed. And then a few years after that, I had my first astrology reading, and the astrologer, saw my chart and he said, "I think you're a writer," amongst like a full hour of a session of reading my natal chart, but that just stood out. And I had already begun the process. So the process for me began as journaling. There were a lot of wounds that weren't healed, there were a lot of things that were unsaid. I had a difficult relationship with my mother growing up because I felt neglected. And I had my one perspective at that time. And so one year under the Cancer full moon, because the Cancer represents the mother, I wrote her a letter that I never intended her to read, um, just expressing everything I was angry for, upset for, resentful for. And I burned it and I washed it away with moon water. And I just thought, I need to let that go. In order to heal, I have to forgive. And so it was interesting after that happened because it kind of opened, I don't know, a portal or some sort of connection. Because from there, she would occasionally call me and apologize for things that I don't remember. And so I thought, wow, this is weird. Or we would have like these one off random conversations. And I learned so much about her in these moments after, 30 something years. And it gave me different perspective. It taught me that, which I said in my book, that she was going through her own trauma, that she just wasn't emotionally available because of everything that she had been through. And it took me a really long time to understand that. And so now I forgive her because, it wasn't her fault.
That is so beautiful to have that kind of like full circle moment. And again, I think so many of us like can relate, especially in this generation,
Hmm.
when maybe it's a privilege that we have to self-actualize and
Yeah.
have hobbies and
Yes.
to feel safe enough order to do so.
Right.
And then to use that to also have compassion and forgive. Like that is healing.
Hmm.
That is like generational healing, you
Right.
know? So
Mhm.
really like celebrating that. And I think that is clear in your book. Whenever, like, the way that you wrote about everyone, I felt like it really made me understand there's multiple layers at play here.
Right.
It's not just that simple. So whenever you write, do you feel there's like ancestral pools, generational pools? Do you feel like you're sharing more than just your story when you write?
I do. I think I keep saying I wrote my book for other people because one, it helped release me from my shame. Even after submitting my manuscript, I thought, oh my God, it's going to be out there. Like, I want my people that know me to buy my book, but I don't want them to read it. And it took a while. Publishing day, I was just like, okay, it's out there. All my business is out there. I hope no one judges me. It was difficult. It was like ripping a really tight band-aid off. But after hearing so many people say they read my book and they have found healing, or they read my book and they found new perspective, or it helped them have crucial conversations with their families, I was just like, that is why I did it. It was meant to heal others. It's not just meant for me. So,
It literally makes me emotional
yeah.
because I think, I wish I could have shared it with my tias, before. Because it really shows that like every generation we get a little bit further to be able to forgive. And I think we can't carry that, baggage with us. And so this is such an important time to be doing so. And so looking at your chart, I was like blown away with the fact that you're going through these portals, this threshold, specifically with your moon. And
Hmm.
I think it goes, beyond our own experience. So there's a release here, there's a shedding, there's a surrendering, there's an understanding that we'll drown if we keep carrying it. So being able to like backstroke,
Mm-hmm.
what is that like, and so whenever I look at your book, it's actually on my altar right now. And so I feel like storytelling can be used as an altar for devotion and for the work and for returning to yourself.
Right.
So, do you have any like ancestral practices whenever you write? I know whenever we sat down, you were like, let's have a moment of gratitude. And, I pulled the selenite spray out. So, are there any practices that you like to enjoy like that?
Just prayer, really. Just trying to connect and speak to my ancestors, even if I don't, I'll be honest, I'm not great at meditating and like just being in a quiet space and holding space to hear. But I do speak and I try to feel as much as I can. But I
Mm.
just, I'm so blessed. I know my ancestors were always protecting me. I know that I love that saying where it's like, I am my ancestors' comeback story, or I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, because I believe that, like who else in my lineage has, published work? Who else in my lineage has been able to live the life like I do? And it's mind blowing, and I owe it to them.
Were there any other storytellers in your family?
Not that I'm aware of. So as you read in my book, my family's very small. It's just my mom, my sister, and myself, and then my dad would occasionally come in and out of our lives. But I didn't have like the huge line of aunts and uncles and cousins. I didn't meet them till I was much older.
Mm.
Didn't have that close connection. So I'm not sure. There's a lot about my family history I don't know.
That's what I love whenever we invite meditation and prayer, and for me, astrology, looking at the astrology chart, is that there's kind of access beyond our known experience, and
Mhm.
there's like wisdom within us. And so, knowing that the South Node eclipse is on your moon, I
Right.
wouldn't be surprised if deep in the lineage there was a strong connection to storytelling, of course.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so maybe whenever you were young, being a book lover,
Mhm.
did you feel represented by the books you were reading?
No, unfortunately, there were not many characters of Latin descent. There were, um, at least for me growing up, it was, very whitewashed because that was what was mainstream in the US. And definitely no stories like what I share, didn't read about parents dealing with domestic violence, parents dealing with drug addiction, parents dealing with poverty. I didn't read any of that. And so everything I read was just like, fairy tales to me. So that's another big reason why I wrote it, because like I always say, I'm not the only person that grew up like that. So I want others to know that they're not alone.
And I think that too is a part of why this book was so powerful. Reading it for me in Texas, being so close to the story and having, that connection to feeling like there are things we shouldn't talk about because of the judgment and the shame, but that only creates more.
Hmm.
And so bringing light to those topics and to those conversations to kind of dissolve that stereotype or that barrier of like what's acceptable and what's not. Yeah, I just think that's so powerful and necessary more and more. And so I think whenever I read this book, it wasn't only for myself, but it was also for like that younger version of me who needed that representation as well.
Right.
So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story because I can totally relate. It's scary being vulnerable and sharing yourself and then like, not wanting anyone to read it.
Yeah.
But it's so meaningful to understand like the impact, especially now. How
Right.
can we be sharing our stories?
Hmm.
So another question I wanted to explore was your relationship with your father.
Hmm.
And yeah, that really hit home for me in the book as well. So, can you tell me a little bit about that relationship and maybe overcoming, the experiences of how that played out? We won't share too much because, just in case anyone hasn't read it,
Right. No spoiler.
but feel free to share whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, so I know I touched on my mom previously, but my relationship with my dad was a very loving one. And I do discuss in the forward, there are a lot of trigger warnings. So anyone who picks up my book, please read the forward for the trigger warnings, and take the time you need to process. A lot of people say they have to put my book down and walk away, and I understand. And
Thank
so
you for saying that too. Thank you for being mindful and sharing that. That's
yes, yes. And so with my dad, he was in and out of our lives a bit. And then towards the end there, we did get some time together, but um, the life is crazy sometimes and things don't end up in a fairy tale how you wish. And so there was some loss there, that was pretty significant. And it kind of just turned my world upside down. And so, I wrote about how I won a $10,000 scholarship at school for writing. And then that was ripped away from me because I had to change schools a few times. And so, even through all of that and not having the money to pay for school on my own and having to work two, three jobs at a time to be able to pay for tuition at Houston Community College, which was the cheapest option out there. And, even though we were living in poverty, still not being granted sufficient funds from Pell Grants and, sort of thing. And I don't believe in debt. So I was not taking out school loans because I was like, when am I going to pay it back?
brilliant of you.
Even though I went through so much and, didn't really get that fairy tale ending that, young children dream of, um, in my young adulthood, I should say, I was still able to, become a success story, essentially. So,
Hearing your story, it's so inspiring because it is an element of honesty where, like, the truth, I think, is so important to
mhm.
not compartmentalize and to not pretend like these things aren't happening, but to like have the awareness to like share your story just kind of creates that path for you to write your own legacy,
Right.
and narrative.
Mhm.
So celebrating that, I see it in the birth chart, having those moments of conflict and tension and overcome. And so that's why I get so excited to look at the birth chart to just reflect on like how we process grief and, moving through that and then having a relationship with loved ones who have passed beyond, And so I think that's all available to us in the birth chart. So thank you for the courage it took to share your story so openly. Your vulnerability is a gift, it's a strength, and that allows creativity to flourish and to heal us and to make us feel less alone and to feel seen and to come together. So, thank you for sharing. I know I'm deeply grateful to be able to have this conversation with you and read this book and to share this book with any of my clients because I think we need more books like this on our shelves. So, thank you for the courage and strength it took to share your story. And I hope to hear that there's more books down the road. I really loved the way that you write. And so, do you have any plans to write any other books?
It's so funny how I mentioned, like, I think the universe was speaking through my husband when he said you should write a book. The first week my book published, people were already like, I'm ready for a second one. Oh, you have
Right? Yeah. I'm
one.
like, I need, yeah.
I'm like, let me have a break. Like, I really want this published. So I think
Because you
so.
did it fat. Yeah, that was a good turnaround.
Yeah, so I think so. I'm just waiting for the right inspiration from the universe to drop. So yeah, I have some ideas, but
Leave
I'm
them wanting more. Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So now let's look at your birth chart. So I have, maybe I'll share my screen just for those tuning in visually. We can kind of look at this. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll look at your chart together. And this is your birth chart with the green planets on the outside are the transits of when you published your book.
oh, okay.
And so, looking at your birth chart, first and foremost, I know there's different types of astrology and different house systems. And so, whenever you talk about your chart, I think you might be talking Placidus, which is a house system that would put your moon in the ninth house of publishing.
Mhm.
And I love Placidus because there is a lot to unpack and it's good, right? But I do use whole sign.
Mhm.
Whole sign houses, I think, are really great for forecasting and for giving us like that exact, like, this is happening. You kind of can't deny it.
Right.
And so to look at this from a whole sign perspective, I also think is fascinating. Like, yes, I think there's that internal relationship to the Placidus, to the moon being in the ninth house of publishing. But I see your moon in Virgo in the 10th house of life's work and world stage and legacy.
Mhm.
And so this is like your story that outlives you.
Mhm.
And as we speak, right now, the South Node is inching its way closer and closer over your moon. So it's literally going to like roll over it in the next couple months. And this happens once every 19 years.
Mhm.
And so this is like a 19-year point of alignment in these eclipse seasons. It can be seen as a portal, a threshold. The South Node wants you to release, surrender, take things off your plate, share your story. Iconic that intuitively, here we are.
Yeah.
And then the North Node is in Pisces, and the North Node is hunger and development, and lean into this house more. And that's where you have your sun and your Mercury, and your sun is your identity, and Mercury is communication,
Mhm.
exchanging information, writing, teaching, learning. So perfect that you were born during a full moon. And this puts your Pisces house in your fourth house of home, ancestors, roots, and where you come from. So understanding that this story, this book that you've shared, I think it's going to be obviously a point of your reputation and legacy that releases over critiquing, overthinking, and perfectionism, and allows there to be a harvest.
Mhm.
And then leaning into the Pisces, which is the vision and that mysticism, that boundless depth, that wisdom that comes from your roots that might be beyond view in our physical sense, but it's within you.
Mhm.
And so I love this. I love as also that Saturn just moved into Aries, which
Mhm.
is your fifth house of pleasure.
Mhm.
And Neptune will be here for 14 years. Saturn will be here for 2 years. And so the fifth house of pleasure, children in your life, creativity, self-expression. And I find like a somatic healing in the body here. So this house is going to be activated for you, which is good news because it trines your Sagittarius rising. A
Mhm.
trine is support, harmony. What do you need? I got you. And
Mhm.
so for as where the last few years, all the things in Pisces, they do square Sagittarius, which is that conflict and tension. And
Mhm.
maybe it's like, our underlying problems that we've had to overcome in different ways that can give the energy of a square. So we've moved through that, but it always leads to growth. And now, with all the things in Aries, it's going to highlight connection, art, and beauty with your Venus there, and kind of being strict with your relationship to pleasure. And so to be strict about to prioritize taking care of yourself in, your expressive ways, storytelling. This is the fifth house. So I kind of see that naturally in the chart right now at this moment. But then looking at the green planets, which is when you published your book,
Mhm.
brilliant that Venus is in Virgo, and Venus in Virgo is not easy.
Mhm.
Speaking from personal experience, I always say like everyone I talk to has strong Virgo placements. I see them in my family, I see them in myself, I see them in my clients, my community, my friends, everyone, Virgo energy. And so Virgo is responsible for the harvest, and Virgo can tend to lean into perfectionism because of that. And so, how do we release that? How do we surrender that? Well, Mercury is organized and analytical here, but Venus is in fall. So Venus in Virgo, Venus is exalted in Pisces, where it has poetry and music and that kind of boundless expression. But
Right.
in Virgo, it can represent to because your moon is here, I see sharing the story of your mom
Hmm.
and how difficult that was and how it wasn't easy.
Right.
But by also maybe experiencing some of those things, put you in a position to overcome this and to create this connection that is bigger and boundless and more resilient and more sustainable because it's within you. And so, yeah, I see that Venus. I love a Venus Virgo. I know it hasn't been easy, but then we get to this point to where we create our own harvest.
Right.
So celebrating that Venus and Virgo for you. Then it's how people see you as well. It's the 10th house. And so I know whenever I see you, and I was like, wow, like representation. It's just your energy is beautiful. And so I think, it's also how people see you in the 10th. And it's that Venusian energy. So while sometimes we may overthink, it's really nice as your honorary Tia reading your chart to kind of like circle that Venus and be like, I know Mija, but we see Venus, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so celebrating that connection.
Hmm.
And then the sun in Libra. And so this is where your midheaven is. Your midheaven is a point in the sky, it's your purpose. The 10th house is called the midheaven, but not everyone has the midheaven in the 10th house. And so you have it in the 11th house of community and friends and patrons and people who want to support you.
Yeah.
So you actually have like this really, it's the house of good fortune, natural skill and talent.
Oh.
Right? It's a lovely house, especially when it's Libra, because Libra is ruled by Venus. So it does have those Venusian traits. But I see just like a big connection to community. And then next to your midheaven, you have an asteroid goddess named Juno,
Oh.
Mother Earth, protector of women and children, inherited ancestral gift, and ceremony. So I
Oh.
think ceremonies are going to tend to be a big part of how you express yourself here. And the sun is your identity, highlighting this in community. Mercury is in Scorpio on your Pluto in the 12th house of the hidden realm. So this shows you talking deeply about things we maybe were told we shouldn't talk about. And maybe this is why I love it so much too, because I love those are the only conversations I want to have, you know? And then you have Vesta here too, which is like a devotion and attending to the flame. The 12th house, there's also an ancient translation of being exiled, being
Mm.
sent off to foreign lands. And while that on some levels might not be literal, but there's a feeling of a disconnect that we find taking an alternative path and holding the lantern for others. So
Yes.
really celebrating these placements and like how they've shown up in your chart. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
I'm like, wow, I'm kind of emotional about it because it feels that way, but to see it in the chart, it's like alignment. It feels like alignment, you know?
Right? It's just like validating to be
Yes,
like, okay, thank you. Because there is energy. It exists. There are things that we can't necessarily see right in front of us,
right.
but it still gives way. And so, looking at your birth chart, this is your innate energy. It is within you all the time. And as a Sagittarius rising, your Uranus is on your ascendant.
Mhm.
And Uranus, yes, innovation, evolution, rebellion can feel like chaos in our
Yeah.
human experience.
Hmm.
So Uranus on the ascendant shows chaos in your early life. But you know what's really exciting right now is that you have made it to a point where Uranus is going to enter Gemini, and that takes about like 42 years to make an exact opposition,
Okay.
but it's going to start by sign this year, 2026. April 25th, Uranus goes into Gemini. And so for anyone born with Uranus and Sagittarius, which is kind of like a 7-year window,
Mhm.
before and after 3.5 years before and after.
Mhm.
And so all of those people with Sagittarius, Uranus, will now have their Uranus opposition. And so a lot of people call it like, your midlife point or something because it's halfway between 80, 84. And so what I see here is your whole life, Uranus has been bellowing under the surface, disrupting, bumping into things, pushing you around. and healing you. And now Uranus is coming into your seventh house of committed partnerships, clients, and contracts, where
Mhm.
you happen to have Chiron, the wounded healer,
Mhm.
taking that medicine, sharing it, feeling maybe an inability to heal yourself, but healing others. There's that relationship to Chiron. And so Uranus, which can feel like chaos and lightning striking, is going to come into Gemini for the next 7 years, and you're going to be in your Uranus opposition. And
Okay.
so I celebrate this because I think, you've gotten to this point to where it felt like chaos at a young age, but
Mhm.
now it's like electricity and you're grounding it, and the world is starting to talk back to you. So that's that literal, Uranus in Gemini, your seventh house, is going to become visible because it's going to go over your descendant.
Mhm.
And so just that's the relationship of the world talking back to you and so forth. So the rest of your life will be Uranus in a visible part of your chart, which you haven't necessarily experienced before in your life.
Right. Wow. That's exciting.
Yeah, definitely celebrating that because I think it's going to help you write. Because when I look at your chart,
Uh-huh.
Gemini is your seventh house. So I'm looking at your other air houses because they're
Mhm.
all going to be trining each other. We talked about your Libra midheaven. Uranus and Gemini will trine your midheaven. So, like electrifying those connections from your seventh house of committed partnerships, clients, and contracts. Keep that in mind, business wise, whatever your intentions are. And then the 11th house of community and patrons and people who want to support you. So, for the next 7 years, Uranus is going to be like electrifying that connection, April 25th for 7 years. And then I look down and I see Aquarius and I see you have Jupiter there, abundance, expansion, the teacher, and it
Mhm.
is in the third house of writing and daily rituals
Mhm.
and siblings or friends who feel like siblings. So there's a really rich connection because at first it's Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn. So there's that relationship. Maybe it takes time for you to develop your mastery here, but you can check that box of time. We're here. So
Okay.
you're an author.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
and so Pluto's in Aquarius for the next 20 years and is going to highlight this, bringing powerful transformations, what feels like death and rebirth, but ultimately like taking that next evolutionary step. So I love the air houses for you. They're going to be working together in harmony, whereas there has been a lot of other points where they were maybe working together through square conflict.
Mhm.
So definitely celebrating this shift.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm so excited to read your chart. I feel honored to just connect and celebrate your energy. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, this is just, it's so mind blowing. Like you said, it's just so validating. I feel like another big thing I've on my spiritual journey is that I've been trying to listen to my intuition more. For example, when I use my tarot, the high priestess always flies out. It just blows my mind how she just jumps out of the deck every time. And I know it's because she's trying to teach me to listen to my intuition, and my higher self is trying to teach me. And I've kind of just always looked forward to turning 40. I don't know what it was.
Mm.
I also always knew my lucky number was 9. Like there were just always these little things behind the scenes that I didn't understand. But now that I'm stepping into it more and trying to align, it's just so validating. Like it's like, okay, I'm on the right path. Like this is my soul's contract and I'm following it and I'm doing a good job and I'm being blessed for it and I can bless others because of it. And so yeah, it's just like mind blowing, you know?
And taking the time to feel that,
Mhm.
I think, yeah, it goes beyond our own experience,
Yeah.
And so kind of like sending that love and that gratitude and that celebration, past, present, and future,
Yeah.
and just goes such a long way. And so I kind of think about like little us in Texas who
Right.
were definitely struggling.
Mhm.
And for us now to be having this conversation here, I'm just so grateful. Thank
Thank
you, thank you, thank you
you.
for taking the time to sit with me I hope we get to sit down again and continue this relationship.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell everyone to read your book. I'm obsessed, so I'll be posting about that on all my socials. So
Thank
thank you, thank you, thank
you
you.
so much. And thank you for the hope for the future. Like, I didn't know that before. So that's something
Yeah.
really exciting to look forward to. So thank you.
And how can we stay connected to you? If anybody wants to find your socials, your website, what's the best way to do so?
Yes, so I'm mostly on TikTok with Betty Feregrino Author, and then also on Instagram and Facebook with Betty Feregrino Author. And I'm working on my website now, so I hope to have it launched soon because I'm really behind on that. And I'm
No
also working.
worries. You can shoot it to me and I'll put it in the link. No problem.
Yay, awesome.
Yay.
Thank
You're
you.
not behind. The stars are aligning. Everything is perfect. We got this. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your light. We need it now more than ever. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks.